Greetings, brothers and sisters. It's a pleasure to make this video presentation in front of you. Though I prefer face-to-face meetings, I'm also very grateful for the technology that allows us to do something like this while many of us are under lockdown and unable to gather together. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Samuel Kubrab. I'm an Ethiopian living in the capital city, Addis Ababa. I serve as African Research Director with New Generations, a ministry catalyzing disciple-making movement among unreached people groups and engaged and unreached people groups found in 56 countries. I also serve as Horn of Africa coordinator for the Movement for African National Initiative, which is abbreviated, sometimes we call it MANI, which is a continental network encouraging African nationals to take initiative to reach unreached people groups found in Africa. MANI is perhaps similar to the Asian Missions Association. I also serve with Vision 59, a global network with the aim of engaging Muslim and engaged unreached people groups wherever they are found, serving the Global Trend Task Force, leading the task force. This presentation is a continuation of the topic coverage plans, on-site research and simple planning. Perhaps I might say it's part 2, which is mainly deals with the tactical aspect. Part 1, which deals with the strategic aspect, has been presented by Brother Justin Long. 3 subtopics which we are going to see in this presentation that are more tactical are how to mobilize national indigenous churches to engage unreached people groups and engaged and unreached people groups. Number 2, how to come up with relevant, valid and updated information to create a synergy effect for engaging and reaching the unreached people groups and the unreached and unengaged people groups. Number 3, identifying available workers and resources for engaging unengaged and unreached people groups as well as unreached people groups and multiplying workers on each stage of the movement. Perhaps I will going to use some missiological terms. One is unreached people groups, or sometimes I use the abbreviated form UPG or UUPGs or UPGs when it comes to the plural, to mean those ethno-linguistic people groups that have less than 2% evangelical believers from their total population. And the second is unengaged, unreached people groups, or UUPG, or if it's plural, UUPGs. Those unreached ethno-linguistic people groups that, as far as we are aware of, there is no effort to make disciples among these people with the intention of seeing a disciple-making movement or church-planting movement. I'm also going to use a term which is abbreviated by DMM, which means disciple-making movement. So to go to the subtopic, the number 1 is how to mobilize national indigenous churches to engage unreached people groups and unengaged and unreached people groups. In dealing with the above subtopic, let me start with a personal story of how I came to be in UPG and UUPG's research, as it will help to illustrate my topic and probably derive some principles too. I started serving in full-time ministry 20 years back among a UPG found in Ethiopia which for security reason I will call the Yoma. While serving to reach the Yoma, I found out another people groups that no one was engaging to reach, meaning a UUPG, which for security reason I will call the Zaze. The Zaze has a population number of about 50,000 and very little was known about them. When I found out that no one was working to reach the Zaze, I approached my church and asked them to engage in reaching them, but because of resource limitation, my church declined to start work among them. So while praying about the Zaze people, I began to have this thought of doing a small survey to find out who the unreached people groups of Ethiopia are and probably produce a profile on them so that the Church of Ethiopia will be mobilized to reach them. To do the survey, I collaborated with known national mission agencies and denominations. We did our survey through sending questionnaires to all ministries and spent many hours of interviewing mission leaders and field workers. We completed the preliminary study in a matter of 1 year. Later, we refined the preliminary study on Ethiopian UPGs using a more comprehensive UPG assessment guideline, which we call Country Assessment Process, abbreviated CAP. The CAP is a structured and more comprehensive guideline in UPG's research. It was created by Data Advisory Team of Money, which I was part of. The outcome of the CAP on Ethiopia was a booklet carrying all the relevant information on the UPGs of Ethiopia. The booklet, published in 2011, helped create awareness about the UPGs and UUPGs of Ethiopia and helped many denominations and ministries to mobilize resources and workers to engage the UPGs and the UUPGs. And one ministry make it a goal to reach the 30 people groups, about 30 people groups that we list them as UPGs, and they have a project which they named Vision 2020. The slogan was to reach all the unreached people groups by 2020, and they were able to mobilize hundreds of church planters and harvest workers. I hope this story was able to show in practical terms what it could look like to mobilize national indigenous churches to engage UPGs and UUPGs. I'd like to pause here and talk about the principles that we learned from doing the country assessment process. 3 principles that were outstanding were: 1, we learned the importance of having a vision to reach the lost. It all starts with the passion for the lost to be reached. One of the most powerful statements that continues to impact my life was a statement made by Oswald J. Smith. He said, "No one has the right to hear the gospel twice, while there remains someone who has not heard it once." Perhaps to some of you, this may be the time in which God is talking to you to drop down whatever good things you are doing pertaining the growth of your local church or Christian community, to pick up a vision to reach those who have not heard the gospel at least once. The second principle that we learned was the importance of having a relevant, valid, and updated information on UPGs and UUPGs. Perhaps one very important principle which I learned from the CAP is a relevant, valid, and updated information has the potentiality to bring about change which leads to action. the change starts in us as we get convinced that this particular people group is unreached, and that in turn will help us to mobilize ourselves as well as others and start a chain reaction of change that leads to more mobilization. So the importance of having a relevant, valid, and updated information has the potentiality to bring about change which leads to action. The third principle that we learned was the importance of collaborating with people who wanted to see the UPGs and UUPGs to be reached. Reaching the UPGs and UUPGs cannot be done by a single individual or a single ministry or a church. It needs a collaborative effort from the whole body of Christ. The number 2 subtopic, how to come up with relevant, valid, and updated information to create a synergy effect for engaging and reaching the UPGs and UUPGs. In other words, how do we acquire valid and relevant information that could lead to mobilizing national indigenous churches to reach UPGs? In our case, we use the country assessment process, which I tried to explain before is a structured and very comprehensive guideline for assessing UPGs and discovering UPGs and UUPGs. The CAP, or the country assessment process, has 3 advantages, which are uniquely related to the process. The first one is it's easy to apply and inexpensive because it does not require extensive field research, but tries to validate and possibly update existing people groups information, namely information that are in Joshua Project, peoplegroups.org, Ethnologue, FTT, or Vision 59. The second, it relies primarily on local knowledge and country sources to update the information. So the local knowledge and country sources are the primary source of information. The third, the people that do the assessment are the nationals. Could also be expatriates, could be part of the assessment team, expatriates that who live in those countries. And we usually prefer that they come from different expertise background. Some of them could be mission practitioners, some anthropologists, demographers, linguists, church planters, to mention some. What do they assess? Information that needs to be validated and updated. 3 areas that need to be assessed and validated are: 1, the ethno-linguistic. They assess the people group name, they assess the people group cluster in primary language. The second thing they assess is the demography. Population number of people group, percentage of Christian adherents, percentage of evangelical Christians. The third thing they assess is the ministry updates. They assess the existence of a strong apostolic team engagement in that UPG, the existence of strong indigenous church or churches that are making effort to reach their people, and they assess the existence of language resources that could help in proclaiming the gospel in people's language. In addition to coming up with an updated list of UPGs and the information of what needs to be done, the CAP had benefited us in two ways. The first way is the CAP from the start became a collaborative effort and promoted the creation of partnership among existing denominations, ministries, and mission agencies at the local level, at the regional level, or even at the national level. The second benefit was it created a culture where an ongoing updating and validation of people groups' information is promoted. Let me illustrate this with two stories. The first one, catalyzing collaboration and partnership of mission-minded entities. This happened after we came up with the updated people group information in 2012. A collaborative effort was created, and they want to mobilize churches found in a particular region in Ethiopia where there exists one unreached people group, which I will call the Hamo for security sake. The Hamo were the main people group in that region, and the population of the Hamo was estimated to be 5 million. The first thing we aimed to do was to be equipped with strong, hard facts that could help us to mobilize these churches. Therefore, we visited almost all the churches that were found in the main towns and cities in the region. We sat with church leaders, learning from them on how they are attempting to reach the Hamo people and the outcome of it. At the end of a week-long visiting of churches, we found out only about 300 Hamo Christ followers exist in the whole region, out of the 5 million of the population. And these Hamo Christ followers do not have a church where they were worshipping in their language and cultural context, but were dispersed throughout the church and worshipping in the national language, which many of them could barely understand. We presented our findings which we have heard from them and collected from them to the evangelical church leaders of that region. The leaders were shocked when they found out almost nothing had been done and is being done to reach the Hamo people group. To make my story short, we ended up partnering with the local evangelical churches. We assisted them in giving training to their church planters on disciple-making movement, and we continued to coach them. In our 8-year-long journey with them, there now exists 553 Hamo churches that worship their own language, about 2,965 Christ followers. We have now many gospel workers and emerging leaders from among the Hamo who are taking the lead to engage Hamo communities with the gospel wherever they are found. The second benefit that we were able to get from the CAP, from the country assessment process, was the country assessment process created a culture where an ongoing updating and validation of people groups information is promoted. After the first round of the country assessment process, which is in 2011, another group of assessors took over the work and continued to refine the initial work and to make it accessible to the Ethiopian evangelical body through presentations, trainings, and by electronic means such as creating a security sensitized website, peoplegroups.ethiopia.net. The dissemination of this information is mobilizing not only churches and ministries, but it led to a rise of harvest workers from the college and university graduates who committed themselves to reach the least reached from the people groups. The third subtopic, identifying available workers and resources for for engaging UUPGs and UPGs in multiplying them. In the country assessment process, we validate and update. One of the things that we validate and update is the outreach ministry data. And that's happening among the UPGs and UUPGs. If you remember well, we asked in the outreach ministry validation whether there exists a strong apostolic team engaging to reach the unreached people group, whether there exists a strong indigenous church or churches that are able to reach their people, that have indigenous harvest workers that can be mobilized. And the third thing that we ask is the existence of language resource that could help in proclaiming the gospel in the people's language. Could be Bible, written or audio, Jesus film, and other gospel literatures. And in identifying available workers and resources for engaging UPGs, we use the same kind of concept but different terms in disciple-making movement. We talk of the outsider leader and the insider leader. We can equate the outsider leader with the apostolic team that have the intention of reaching the people group. CAP uses the apostolic team, while DMM uses the outsider leader. Both of them, their work is to facilitate the emerging of few obedient ordinary disciples or insider leaders. The insider leaders can be equated to harvest workers in the indigenous church that has been planted and that are trying to reach their people through DMM. It is these insider leaders who will initiate and sustain a disciple-making movement in their people. Disciple-making movement is initiated and sustained as more multi-generational insider workers are raised. So as the DMM progresses at each stage of the growth, most of the movements create their own organic structure and leadership that enables them to organize and at the same time to sustain the movement of kingdom expansion. And at each stage of movement growth, when required, the outsider leader helps the insider leaders to develop their leadership skills and help them to grow in spiritual maturity through training, coaching, and mentoring. In this type of healthy leadership development, a continued mentoring relationship between the outsider leader and the insider leaders may be required until, from the existing movement, disciple makers begin to be intentionally sent to start DMM in other UPGs or UUPGs. Therefore, in a way, the end goal of reaching the UPGs or UUPGs is not just to see the emergence of a large body of Christ followers from that people group that's being reached, but to see that this large number of Christ followers be mobilized to reach other UPGs and UUPGs. Thus, the main reason we need to identify, raise, and multiply workers through a DMM process of leadership development is to see the cascading of movements from one people group to the other until all have heard. Therefore, when we identify available workers and resources for engaging UUPGs and UPGs and trying to multiply them, it's for the benefit of the people groups that's being reached, that a large body of Christ be formed among them, but we say it's not the end goal to see a large body of Christ being formed in the people groups that's being reached. It is the end point, or the end goal is to see that large body of Christ that has been raised from the unreached people group, reaching other people groups, sending workers to reach other people groups until all have heard. So we say of cascading of movement from one people group to the other. Let me finish my presentation of this third point by telling you our story as an illustration. At the beginning of my presentation, I have told you my first work among the UPGs was among a people group which I chose to call the Yoma people group. And while we were doing the work of reaching the Yoma, we discovered the Zaza people group, which to our knowledge, no one was reaching, or they were a UUPG. Our work among the Yoma did not take off until 7 years into the work, the time when we begin to be exposed to DMM principles. One of the DMM principles that really helped us in our context was raising the few new Christ followers from the Yoma as disciple makers and relying on them for the work of DMM among their people. And the new Christ followers whom we were discipling were about 20 young teenage students who lived in our student hostel, which we were operating as an access ministry. The DMM work among the Yoma started to grow, and in a matter of 3 years, the number of churches grew from 7 to 54. Previously, we were planting on the average 1 church per year, but now the number grew to 16 churches per year. And it was a joy to see these teenagers baptizing their moms and dads and near relatives. Currently, the movement among the Yoma people group is in its 15th year, and there are 364 churches and 5,672 new Christ followers, and it is in its 7th generation of growth. But most importantly, 3 months ago, the movement had sent a Yoma worker to their neighboring UUPG, the Zaze, to engage them with DMM. This event was an occasion of celebration, since we were able to witness a movement that started in one unreached people groups, cascading to a DMM engagement in another unengaged and unreached people group. We will continue to pray and believe that the movement that will start among the Zaze people will in turn cascade a movement in another UPG or UUPGs until the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In concluding my presentation, I'd like to part by saying it is possible to finish the task of reaching the unreached and the unengaged people groups in our generation if, 1, we make it our first priority to reach them. 2, we work hard to collect strong facts and information on UPGs and UUPGs that could help the body of Christ to be awake and mobilized to reach them. 3, we work in unity and collaboration with a singleness of mind and heart to reach the unreached. I will end with this quotation which I read somewhere. It says, "The Great Commission is too big for anyone to accomplish alone and too important not to try to do together." Thank you for listening. God bless you.